and bringing you the news behind the news, the story behind the story, hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at and that illusion is usually king. But in the battle for the survival of Western civilization, it's going to be reality and not illusion or delusion that will determine what the future will bring. And I need to remind you the views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They're my views. And for the next hour, they're going to be the views of Sydney, of Bob Fletcher. What would we get to talk about tonight?
Well, I guess, what everybody's been talking about for hundreds of years, I guess, and that's the weather. We can talk about the weather, and we have introduction into the weather system of some very strange things that we don't commonly have. We're not just talking about common weather structures, which, of course, we've been noticing the Midwest getting pulverized with tornadoes, and the hurricane season coming upon us with the prediction of having maybe 30 or 40% more hurricanes than usual.
And, basically we're seeing basically snow suddenly in the Middle West, in the middle of May, the end of May. I know I was down at the wharf here in Santa Cruz this last Sunday, a weekend, and basically the gentleman who owns one of the restaurants there said, have you ever seen as much wind as we're having now? He's been there probably for 30 or 40 years. And his comment to me was, I've never seen this much wind before. And he's talking about the wind here on the west coast of California. You're absolutely right. Something is altering our weather. What could that be? Is this simply an act of God, or is it possibly an act of men? Go right ahead.
Well, it may be partially, because it could be the act of man. As we know, they've been fooling with weather and weather control and alterations, and of course the Chinese now they've had this huge weather control operation for a few years. Once they were able to steal all the latest mischievous electronic weather manipulation that the United States has. But I'll tell you what I'm positive it is at this point. And again, I've talked about this before, and we're working on it to put it into a configuration so everybody will understand it too. But we do have an approaching astronomical problem, and that is the Nibiru or Planet X or whatever you want to call it. It's been given 3 or 4 different names over the last 10 years. But I believe that's already affecting our weather, as it is and has been affecting the outer planets for the last couple of years very seriously.
Well, you're going to have to tell us about this, because I'm not acquainted with it. Is this an asteroid? Is this another planet? What is this, and how is it influencing the weather patterns in other planets? How is it influencing possibly our weather here today? And basically, with a tremendous increase in tornadoes, and certainly some of these tornadoes ordinarily they'll sit down on the ground for 2 or 3 minutes and wreak havoc. This last one that was certainly there, and it was going through, basically we were talking on the ground for 15 or 20 minutes, and suddenly just destroying everything in its path over something 17 miles long and 3 or 4 miles wide, just massive destruction. But you go right ahead, Bob.
Well, there's several things going on right now. We have slowly approaching, and of course they've not been able to definitively calculate where or what, actually when the closest passing is going to be, but some point in time, possibly within the next year, maybe a few months, maybe 18 months. There is an anticipation and concern about the huge, what is the 10th planet, with this Nibiru that's been out and makes this huge 2,000 to 3,000 year orbit of the Earth, and they're genuinely anticipating it, and that's what I've been working on, is when I tried to find out where billions and billions of dollars have gone to here in the last 10, 20, 30 years. and how the increase of money of vanishing and huge amounts of money, not the regular money stolen by criminals out of Washington, which is in the millions at a time, but where this money was going, and I've finally figured it out.
But what does that have to do with this planet?
Well, what it has to do is they know it's coming. They are refusing to formally notify the people of the Earth in general. The elitists at the highest levels are building hideouts for themselves and all of this. It's starting to now, for the first time in the last couple of years, or even the last year, it's starting to flex its muscles by as it approaches other planets in our solar system. From the outer planets inward, it's been changing and altering and causing atmospheric changes on those planets. It may be even affecting the sun. And as of yesterday, NASA photographed with their observatory what is possibly the largest solar coronal hole, a hole in the atmosphere of the sun itself. And what this has permitted, which June 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, if there's any impact at all, we will feel it from this in terms of geomagnetic storms and aurora borealis that we're not used to at all around possibly both the poles of the Earth. And depending on when what they call major blasts of solar wind and magnetic fields have blasted out of this hole as of yesterday. And it will be about June the 2nd or the 3rd. It'll be crossing Earth's path. Now, depending on what direction the Earth is at the very time that these bombardments come from the solar magnetic storms, when they hit the Earth, depending on where those atmospheric holes are in our atmosphere, it will either permit or it will help to deflect these storms. If we happen to be aimed in the wrong direction, there are a couple of large openings in our own atmosphere. It will permit these huge storms of plasma coming from the sun.
Well, let me explain to our listeners. Sure. Basically, these can come in if they are of insufficient intensities. The gamma rays come in, they hit the oxygen molecules, they break off electrons, and then this whole suddenly a stream of electrons sweeps around the world as an electronic storm and simply fries the electronic grid. Now, basically, that is, of course, the danger of the solar flares, and certainly, or of an EMP, a nuclear attack in the stratosphere. Are you actually suggesting that this is a possibility?
Oh, absolutely.
But Bob, certainly, how could this be going on and we're not hearing about it?
Simply look up NASA, May 29th, and the word coronal hole. You can look it up and you can find their own pictures that they just took of this. But there is a reason for all of this increase. And it is, in my opinion, the incoming effect of this Planet 10, the Planet X, Nibiru, coming closer to our system, in our system.
Okay, well, let's go to Robus. John, who's calling us from Spokane. John, do you have a question, comment?
Yes, I have a question. Bob, I was following Planet X, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, there were daily downloads of what was going on with it from the SOHO satellites up till about November 2008, and then I think they said technical difficulties and what have you, and they stopped. And I know that it was coming in from the south, and that you had Bill Gates put that telescope there in Chile, and you got all this stuff going on in Antarctica, and then the Vatican has its thing.
Right.
Okay, so, and then there was just a big blackout. You couldn't find any information, talk shows, nobody's talking about it except for John Moore and you. So tell us more about Planet X and what your take is at this stage.
Oh, okay, I'd be glad to, and that's a good question. A few years back, I was saying 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it pretty much was acknowledged and then classified as really to be kept secret. And information on it was they tried to keep as much information as they could away from the general public, just on the possibility, well, actually the reality being, how do you tell the Earth that there may in reality have something that's going to come around and cause Noah's flood all over again? Now, timetable-wise, it's very difficult. Nobody's been able to come with a real good, accurate timetable on this thing. But it's now starting to be photographed at certain levels in certain locations on the Earth, aiming out in the right direction at the right time. And there are, like the Red Chinese and the Russians, have accepted the concept that it is coming back around. They have spent multi-billions, the same as the United States has, secretly, with taking our money covertly and building all these underground facilities, not for you and I, but for themselves. And that's the reality. The bottom line in terms of the planet itself, if it is as has been described, it is about 5 times the size of the Earth. It's huge. It's very big. It's not expected to strike the Earth, but it's expected to pass the orb of the Earth, coming in one time and going out. If it does this and passes as that closely to pass through, they anticipate just a multitude of gravitational alterations, magnetics, and all the rest of that, an effect that would be just devastating.
On that, if I may,
yes,
isn't that the reason why they chose Denver and up against on that side of the Rocky Mountains for continuity of government? And isn't that the reason why all those abandoned inland cities in China, or no?
No. All of that's accurate. When in fact all of this Earth changes takes place from the planet coming through again, and so not only are they already built in highlands, but they actually will be higher when the time comes that the geography of the Earth gets altered by this darn 10th planet swinging through our particular orbit. So yes, those Chinese cities and being kept empty, they are being created as the safe spots for a select few million Chinese. Yes, sir. And at the same time, we are, of course, spending money at not only the Denver airport as an underground, but there's like 100 of them located in different places in the mountainsides and in where they've taken over the old NORAD facility. That's been converted into a hideout for the elite.
And incidentally, I talked to Peter Pry in Washington, D.C. He was the executive director of the Congressional Commission on EMG attacks, and he was commenting that the Russians actually have a mountain, and they've hollowed out the hole inside of it. It will hold a couple of 100,000 people, at least 100,000.
That's just one. They started in 2010 to accomplish 5,000 hideouts for Russian people. That's how many they were doing, and some of them are as big as you're referring to. Some of them are the size of cities that could hold thousands and thousands of people. Okay, well, that was a good call.
It really was. And basically, of course, this is why we love having you on here. And basically, most of our listeners aren't even aware of these things, so this is not imaginary, ladies and gentlemen. This is very real. And as I say, I talked to Peter Pry this morning. He was telling me about this center suddenly in Russia, a whole mountain hollowed out, and he said hundreds of thousands, and whether he meant several 100,000 or 100,000, I don't know. That's a lot of people to put into a mountain, but they're prepared for it. They know cataclysmic event is coming. The average American can't believe this sort of thing. After all, we're dealing with important things. Our guest is Bob Fletcher. You can go to his website, get his information. Bob does a great job, and certainly one of our favorite guests. I hope he is yours as well. You need to understand that we're involved in a spiritual battle being played out on a political, ideological, and cultural battlefield, but it is certainly a spiritual battle, and so we ask you to pray for America. We ask you to pray for revival, for our leaders, our ministers, but please pray for Radio Liberty, for our provision and our protection, and so until tomorrow, may the Lord be with you.